Imagine coming home one day to find your bank accounts emptied, your locks changed, and your husband of 8 years gone without a trace. Now, imagine facing this nightmare while being 6 months pregnant with triplets. This is exactly what happened to Rebecca Thornton on a rainy April evening in 2012, abandoned, betrayed, and left virtually penniless with 3 babies on the way. Rebecca had to rebuild her life from absolute zero. But what her husband Daniel never discovered was that Rebecca possessed something far more valuable than the money he stole. A secret inheritance that she had protected from his greed. Now, 10 years later, Daniel Thornton has suddenly reappeared. The successful tech executive who once discarded his family like yesterday's trash is now desperate, facing financial ruin and criminal charges. And he believes his only salvation lies in accessing the fortune that Rebecca has kept hidden all these years. But what happens when the woman you abandoned holds the key to your survival? And what price will Rebecca demand for the help he doesn't deserve? Rebecca Matthews was 32 years old when her world collapsed around her. A talented architectural designer who had put her promising career on hold to support her husband's tech startup, she had spent the last 5 years working behind the scenes as Daniel built Thornton Innovations into a rising star in the San Francisco tech scene. The pregnancy had been unexpected. They had been trying for years without success. When the doctor announced they were expecting triplets, Daniel's reaction had seemed odd in retrospect. Instead of joy, he'd grown quiet, calculating. Rebecca had brushed it off as shock, never imagining what was really going through his mind. That fateful day in April began like any other. Rebecca had gone to her prenatal appointment, then stopped to pick up groceries on her way home. The first sign something was wrong came when her key wouldn't turn in the lock of their Oakland Hills home. Confused, she rang the doorbell, thinking, perhaps Daniel had changed the locks due to a security concern. No answer. When she called his cell phone, it went straight to voicemail. Calls to his office were deflected by his assistant, who sounded uncomfortable and evasive. Growing increasingly worried, Rebecca called their neighbor Martin, who reluctantly came outside with a strange expression. Rebecca, I saw Daniel loading suitcases into his car this morning. He had 2 other men with him carrying out boxes. I assumed you were moving and just hadn't mentioned it. A cold dread washed over her. We're not moving. At least, I'm not aware of any plans to move. With Martin's help, Rebecca called a locksmith who arrived an hour later. When they finally gained entry to the house, Rebecca froze in the doorway, unable to process what she was seeing. The home was half empty. Daniel's possessions were gone. His office cleared out, their shared bedroom, his closet completely barren. On the kitchen counter lay a single envelope containing divorce papers and a bank card. When Rebecca rushed to their computer to check their accounts, she discovered the devastating truth. Their joint savings account, which had held over $200,000, now showed a balance of just $12,500. Their investment accounts emptied. Even her personal checking account had been drained, leaving just $432. Rebecca collapsed onto the couch, her hands protectively covering her swollen belly as the triplets kicked inside her, blissfully unaware that their father had just abandoned them all. The following days became a blur of police reports, frantic calls to lawyers, and terrifying realizations. Daniel had been planning this for months. He had systematically moved their assets, created shell companies, and hidden their money. The startup that Rebecca had helped build, the one in which she'd never formalized her role, despite contributing key designs and strategic direction, was now headquartered in Singapore with Daniel as sole owner. Mrs. Thornton, I have to be honest with you, said Eleanor Reeves, the third attorney Rebecca had consulted. Your husband executed this plan with surgical precision. He exploited legal loopholes, international banking laws, and the fact that your contributions to the company were never officially documented. Fighting this would take years and resources you simply don't have. 1 week after Daniel's disappearance, Rebecca received an email from him, the only communication she would get for the next decade. Rebecca, by now you understand that our marriage is over. The divorce papers are fair. You get the house, I get the company. The $20,500 should cover immediate expenses until you figure something out. I'm not cut out for fatherhood, especially not to 3 children at once. Don't try to find me. It will be a waste of your time and what little money you have left. What Daniel didn't know, what he had never bothered to learn in their 8 years of marriage, was that Rebecca had an inheritance from her grandmother. Not money exactly, but something potentially far more valuable. Ownership of a small, abandoned historical property in the California gold country, and a collection of her grandmother's research materials on local mining history. Rebecca had kept these assets in a trust under her maiden name, a decision that had sparked arguments with Daniel, who saw no value in worthless land and dusty old papers. But now, 6 months pregnant with triplets, facing foreclosure on their heavily mortgaged house and with barely enough money for groceries for the week, Rebecca's secret inheritance seemed like a desperate last resort rather than the blessing her grandmother had intended. You'll understand someday why I set things up this way, her grandmother had told her years earlier. Some things need to be protected from those who don't understand their true value. With nowhere else to turn, Rebecca sold her wedding ring for just $800, packed what she could fit into her modest sedan, and drove 3 hours northeast to the small Sierra Nevada foothills town of Gold Springs, where a dilapidated Victorian cottage and 5 acres of overgrown land awaited her. It was a property that had been in her family for generations, but hadn't been lived in for decades. As she pulled up the weed-choked driveway, rain pounding on her windshield and her back aching from the triplets' weight, Rebecca wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. The cottage looked barely habitable, peeling paint, sagging porch, broken windows patched with plywood. But as lightning flashed across the darkening sky, illuminating the decrepit structure, Rebecca felt something unexpected, a sense of coming home. Little did she know that what awaited her inside that rundown cottage would change not only her fate, but also the lives of countless others, and one day bring Daniel Thornton back to his knees before her. Rebecca sat in her car for nearly 20 minutes, summoning the courage to approach the cottage. The rain had eased to a gentle patter, but darkness was falling quickly. With no electricity connected to the property, she would need to find shelter and assess the situation before night fully descended. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed her emergency flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped out into the muddy driveway. The key to the cottage was on a tarnished ring her grandmother had given her years ago, along with strict instructions. Keep this safe and keep it secret. There's more to our family legacy than meets the eye. The old brass key stuck in the lock at first, requiring Rebecca to jiggle it persistently before the mechanism finally gave way with a reluctant groan. The door swung inward, releasing a musty wave of dust and abandonment. Rebecca's flashlight beam cut through the gloom, revealing a time capsule of the past. Sheets draped over furniture created ghostly silhouettes. Cobwebs festooned the corners. A layer of dust coated every surface. But beneath the neglect, Rebecca could see the bones of something beautiful, intricate Victorian woodwork, a grand stone fireplace, built-in bookshelves, and surprisingly intact hardwood floors. "Well, babies," she whispered, placing a hand on her swollen belly, "it's not much, but it's ours." A sudden noise from the back of the house made her jump. Heart racing, Rebecca swung the flashlight toward the sound. "Hello? Is someone there?" Floorboard creaked, and then a gravelly voice responded, Don't mean to frighten you, Ma'am. Was just checking to make sure no vandals were breaking in. An elderly man emerged from the shadows, holding an old-fashioned oil lantern. His weathered face was partially hidden beneath a silver beard, and he wore a worn flannel shirt and overalls that had seen better days. Frank Holloway, he introduced himself, keeping a respectful distance. I keep an eye on this place for, well, I suppose for your family, though we haven't seen any Matthews around these parts in years. Rebecca lowered the flashlight. You knew my grandmother? Eleanor Matthews. Sure did. Fine woman. Smartest person in the county, if you ask me. His eyes narrowed. You must be little Becky, though not so little anymore. Rebecca, she corrected automatically, then felt a rush of emotion. You remember me? You used to collect rocks by the creek every summer when you visited, always asking questions about gold mining that would stump most grown folks. His gaze dropped to her pregnant belly. Looks like life's dealt you some changes. Rebecca's chin trembled before she steeled herself. Yes, quite a few. Frank seemed to sense her distress. He raised his lantern higher. Place needs work, but the structure's sound. I've kept the worst of the weather damage at bay. Roof doesn't leak much, except in the far bedroom. Thank you, Rebecca said, genuinely moved by this unexpected kindness. I wasn't expecting anyone to have looked after it. Frank shrugged. Your grandmother paid me to keep an eye on things. After she passed, I just kept on doing it. Seemed right. She passed 7 years ago. You've been maintaining this place without payment all this time? Wasn't much to do, just chased off the occasional teenager looking for a haunted house adventure. He cleared his throat. But you can't stay here tonight. No electricity, no running water yet. My daughter runs the Creekside Inn in town. She'll put you up until we can get this place somewhat livable. Rebecca wanted to refuse, to prove she could handle this herself, but the reality of her situation, heavily. Pregnant, exhausted, facing a dilapidated house as night fell, made pride a luxury she couldn't afford. And that's very kind. I can pay for a night or two, but then I'll need to figure something out. My funds are limited. Frank's expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes suggested he understood more than she was saying. Let's get your bag then. You can follow my truck into town. The Creekside Inn turned out to be a charming 7-room establishment on Gold Springs Main Street. Frank's daughter, Lily Holloway, was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and efficient movements. Dad called ahead, she explained, leading Rebecca to a cozy ground-floor room. Said you're Eleanor Matthews's granddaughter. That makes you practically royalty in this town, whether you know it or not. Rebecca's confusion must have shown on her face, because Lily continued, Your grandmother helped save this town when the mining company tried to force everyone out in the 80s. Her research proved the historical significance of our buildings, got the whole downtown declared a historical district. I knew she was a historian, but I didn't realize, she was much more than that, Lily said with a mysterious smile. Anyway, this room's on the house for tonight. Tomorrow we can talk about what you need. Too exhausted to argue, Rebecca thanked her and collapsed onto the bed as soon as Lily left. Despite her physical and emotional exhaustion, sleep proved elusive. Her mind raced with questions and worries. How would she prepare the cottage in time for the babies? How would she support them once they arrived? What exactly was this legacy her grandmother had hinted at? Morning brought a surprising flurry of activity. By the time Rebecca awoke and made her way to the inn's small dining room, Lily had apparently spread the word about Eleanor Matthews' pregnant granddaughter returning to town. An older woman named Margaret, who owned the local hardware store, arrived with a notebook and pencil. We'll need to assess what supplies you'll need for basic repairs, she stated matter-of-factly. The town doctor, Dr. Chen, insisted on checking Rebecca's vital signs and asking about her prenatal care. Triplets, my goodness. You'll need monitoring. I can arrange visits to my office, but we should also connect you with the specialist in Sacramento. A handyman named Carlos offered to check the cottage's plumbing and electrical systems. No charge. For the assessment, your grandmother helped my family stay in our home during tough times. By noon, Rebecca found herself at the center of an impromptu community mobilization. These strangers, these people who held her grandmother in such high regard, were rallying around her with a determination that left her speechless. "Why are you all helping me?" she finally asked, during a lull in the planning session that had taken over one of the inn's tables. Frank, who had been quietly observing from the corner, spoke up. "Because that's what Eleanor would have expected, and because that property of yours, it's more important to this town than you realize." There was something in his tone that made Rebecca pause. Important? It's just an old cottage and some overgrown land. The group exchanged glances that Rebecca couldn't quite interpret. "Your grandmother believed that some treasures should be protected until the right time," Margaret said carefully. "She trusted you would come when you were meant to." "But I didn't come by choice," Rebecca admitted, her voice breaking slightly. "I had nowhere else to go." Lily reached over and patted her hand. "Sometimes life pushes us where we need to be, even when we think we're just running from something else." As the group dispersed with promises to meet at the cottage that afternoon, Rebecca felt a curious mixture of gratitude and unease. These people seemed to know something about her property, about her grandmother's intentions, that she didn't. And whatever secret lay hidden in that run-down Victorian cottage, Rebecca sensed it might be both her salvation and a responsibility she wasn't sure she was prepared to shoulder. That afternoon, Rebecca stood on the sagging porch of her grandmother's cottage, watching in amazement as pickup trucks and cars lined the overgrown driveway. At least a dozen people from town had arrived with tools, cleaning supplies, and determined expressions. "We'll have you weather-tight and with basic amenities before sundown," Carlos promised, already examining the electrical panel. Inside, women from the local historical society were clearing cobwebs and dust, while others brought in essentials: a new mattress, groceries, basic kitchenware. Rebecca tried to protest the generosity, but Lily gently steered her to a chair. "You're growing 3 humans. Supervise and rest those feet." As the day progressed, Rebecca felt overwhelmed by the transformation. Electricity hummed back to life. Water sputtered, then flowed from taps. Windows were unsealed and washed until they sparkled in the afternoon sun. "Your grandmother's study is still locked," Margaret called from the hallway. "Did she give you a key for it?" Rebecca remembered the second key on her grandmother's ring, smaller, with an unusual notched pattern. Following Margaret to a narrow door at the end of the hall, she inserted the key with trembling fingers. The lock turned smoothly, as if recently oiled. Unlike the rest of the house, the study was immaculate. No dust, no cobwebs, as if someone had been maintaining it regularly. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with leather-bound volumes and carefully labeled archival boxes. A massive oak desk dominated the center, its surface arranged with precision: a magnifying glass, a leather journal, and a stack of maps. "This is impossible," Rebecca whispered. "The house has been empty for years." Frank appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Some rooms keep their own secrets." Before Rebecca could question him, her eye caught something on the desk, a sealed envelope with her name written in her grandmother's distinctive script. With shaking hands, she broke the seal. "My dearest Rebecca, if you're reading this, you've come to Gold Springs, as I always knew you would. The circumstances may not be what you'd hoped, but trust that you are exactly where you need to be. What I've guarded all these years now passes to you. Our family didn't just chronicle Gold Springs' history. We are its custodians. The true gold of this land was never fully extracted, and for good reason. In the journal on my desk, you'll find the beginning of the story. The rest awaits your discovery. Trust Frank Holloway. He's been my keeper of secrets since we were children. Remember, what seems like the end of one path is often the beginning of the one you were meant to walk all along. With all my love, Grandmother. Rebecca looked up at Frank, who nodded solemnly. She made me promise to maintain this room, to be ready for when you came. Said it might be years, but that you'd arrive when the legacy needed you most. Rebecca's fingers brushed the leather journal. Opening it revealed detailed maps, geological surveys, and handwritten notes about the Mother Lode, apparently a massive gold deposit that had never been properly documented in official records. "Is this real?" Rebecca asked, her heart racing. "Very real," Frank confirmed. "Your grandmother discovered evidence of a major gold deposit that extends beneath this property and parts of the town. She kept it secret to protect the town from being destroyed by modern mining operations. There's gold under my land, worth millions, probably more, but extracting it would destroy everything above it. That's why she protected the information, waiting for the right moment and the right person." Rebecca stared at the journal, the enormity of what she'd inherited beginning to sink in. This wasn't just land and a cottage. It was potentially one of the most valuable undeveloped gold deposits in California, and a tremendous responsibility. As the babies kicked inside her, Rebecca realized her grandmother had provided not just shelter in her time of need, but the foundation for an entirely new future. The weeks that followed were a blur of activity. Rebecca divided her time between studying her grandmother's journals and preparing the cottage for the triplets' arrival. The more she read, the more astounding the discovery became. Her grandmother hadn't just found evidence of gold. She had meticulously documented an untapped vein potentially worth billions, not millions as Frank had initially suggested. The deposit extended beneath her property and portions of the historical district. If exploited by conventional mining, it would destroy the town completely. She was approached multiple times by mining companies, Frank explained one evening, as they sat on the newly repaired porch. They suspected something was here, but couldn't prove it without access to her research. Why didn't she just sell? She could have been incredibly wealthy. Frank shook his head. Eleanor believed some things matter more than money. This town, its history, the community, she wouldn't sacrifice it for personal gain. Instead, her grandmother had developed an alternative plan. Her journals outlined a method for limited, strategic extraction that would preserve the town while still yielding substantial wealth over time. The notes described specialized equipment and proprietary techniques that would need to be developed. She was waiting for the right moment, Frank said, and the right allies. Before Rebecca could fully process everything, the triplets decided to make their appearance 6 weeks early. It was Lily who rushed her to the hospital in Sacramento, where 3 tiny but healthy girls were delivered by emergency C-section. Sophia, Olivia, and Emma Thornton entered the world within minutes of each other, setting off a chain reaction of support from the town Rebecca had only known for weeks. When she returned home with her daughters, she found the cottage transformed. Yet again, a nursery had been prepared with 3 bassinets, changing tables and rocking chairs. A freezer was stocked with prepared meals. A schedule on the refrigerator showed volunteers who would help with night feedings and baby care. "We take care of our own," Margaret told her simply. The first 6 months passed in a sleep-deprived haze. Between feeding schedules, diapers, and recovery from her C-section, Rebecca barely had time to think about gold deposits or her grandmother's legacy. But as the babies grew and established more predictable routines, Her mind returned to the matter at hand. On a crisp autumn morning, as the triplets napped under Lily's watchful eye, Rebecca met with Frank and a trusted attorney from Sacramento, recommended by Dr. Chen's husband. "I want to establish a trust," Rebecca explained. "One that protects both the gold and the town. If something happens to me, I need to ensure my daughter's future without risking Gold Springs' destruction." The legal structure they created was complex but elegant, a conservation easement combined with a mining trust that would allow for limited, non-invasive extraction using advanced techniques. The profits would be divided, 30% to a town improvement fund, 30% to historical preservation, and 40% to Rebecca and eventually her daughters. "This is remarkably similar to what your grandmother envisioned," the attorney noted, reviewing Eleanor's journals. She was quite forward-thinking. With the legal framework in place, Rebecca began consulting with mining engineers and environmental scientists who could help implement her grandmother's methods. The work was slow and deliberate, conducted with utmost secrecy. By the triplets' first birthday, the initial test extraction had yielded enough gold to secure Rebecca's immediate financial future and fund the first wave of town improvements. Subtle enhancements that raised property values without drawing undue attention, but success brought new challenges. "Someone's been asking questions around town," Frank reported one evening. "A developer claiming to be interested in historical restoration, but focusing too much on property records and mineral rights." A week later, Rebecca noticed an expensive black SUV driving slowly past her cottage. The same vehicle appeared again. The next day, this time stopping briefly before continuing on. When she checked her mailbox that afternoon, she found a business card. "Westland Development Group, Alexander Westland, CEO," with a handwritten note on the back. "Interested in discussing your property. Substantial offer forthcoming." Rebecca's research revealed the disturbing truth. Westland Development was a shell company with hidden ownership. Further digging uncovered connections to Thornton Innovations, Daniel's company. "He couldn't have found out about the gold," she told Frank, her voice shaking. "It's impossible. Maybe not the gold specifically," Frank reasoned, "but something has drawn his attention back to you after all this time." Rebecca looked at her daughters playing on the living room floor, then at the cottage that had become their sanctuary. "Whatever he wants, he can't have it," she said firmly. "Not the gold, not the property, and certainly not my daughters." Spring in Gold Springs had always been Rebecca's favorite season. The morning sun filtered through the cherry blossoms as she sipped her coffee on the front porch of what the locals now called Matthews Manor. The sound of laughter drew her attention to the sprawling lawn where her daughters played. "Mom, watch this," called Emma as she performed a perfect cartwheel. A decade of hard work had transformed both the property and her life. The triplets had grown from fragile newborns into vibrant 10-year-olds, Sophia with her analytical mind, Olivia with her artistic talent, and Emma with her fearless spirit. The cottage had evolved into a tastefully restored Victorian home, expanded to accommodate their needs but maintaining its historical character. The surrounding land had been transformed as well, with gardens that drew visitors from across the region. Gold Springs itself had undergone a renaissance. The historical district boasted restored buildings, a thriving arts scene, and new businesses. Property values had tripled, yet the town retained its close-knit character, with most residents unaware of the source of their good fortune. Rebecca's careful extraction operation had yielded substantial wealth over the decade, all managed through the trust structure that protected both the town and her family. She had completed her architectural degree online and now ran a successful restoration consulting business that allowed her to work primarily from home. "Mom, there's someone coming up the driveway," Sophia called, pointing toward the entrance. where a sleek Tesla was navigating the curves. Rebecca felt a chill of recognition even before she could make out the driver. Some instincts never fade, even after 10 years. "Girls, go inside and find Miss Lily," she said calmly, using the name they called Lily Holloway, who had become like a grandmother to them. "But Mom, now, please." Something in Rebecca's tone brooked no argument. The girls exchanged glances, but obediently headed inside. Rebecca straightened her posture and walked down the steps to meet the car, stopping at a careful distance as it parked. Daniel Thornton stepped out, looking both familiar and foreign. His once boyish face had hardened with age and stress. Designer clothes hung on a frame that seemed thinner than she remembered. His eyes, those eyes that had once charmed her completely, darted around the property with barely concealed calculation. Before settling on her, Rebecca, his voice carried the same confident tone she remembered, but with an undercurrent of something new. Desperation, perhaps. "Daniel, this is unexpected." Her voice remained even, betraying none of the turmoil beneath. "How did you find me?" It wasn't easy. He attempted a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You've done well for yourself. Very well, from the looks of it." "State your business, Daniel. After 10 years of silence, I doubt this is a social call." His expression tightened momentarily before he regained composure. "May we talk inside? What I have to discuss is private." "We can. Talk on the porch. You're not welcome in my home." Annoyance flashed across his face, but was quickly replaced with a conciliatory nod. As they settled into the wicker chairs on the porch, Rebecca noticed the fine tremor in his hands, the slight sheen of sweat on his forehead despite the mild temperature. "I've been following your progress," he began. "Quite the transformation you've managed here. Property development? Historical restoration?" "Something like that," she replied neutrally. "What do you want, Daniel?" He leaned forward, dropping the pretense. "I'm in trouble, Rebecca, serious trouble. I gathered as much. What kind of trouble would bring you back after abandoning your pregnant wife and stealing our life savings?" Daniel winced. "I deserve that. But this isn't just about me. Thornton Innovations is facing multiple federal investigations. Securities, fraud, tax evasion, intellectual property theft. They've frozen most of our assets." "You remarried?" Rebecca asked, more curious than hurt. "Business partners?" "No, I never remarried." He paused. "The company is failing. I have creditors threatening legal action, investors demanding their money back, and the feds breathing down my neck. I'm looking at potential prison time." Rebecca felt a complex mixture of emotions. Satisfaction at his downfall, lingering anger at his betrayal, and a strange emptiness where she had expected to feel triumph. "And you're here because I need money, a substantial amount, quickly." He met her eyes directly. "I've been investigating your situation for months. You're sitting on something valuable here. Whether it's the land, mineral rights, or something else, whatever it is, I need access to it." "Let me understand this," Rebecca said, keeping her voice level. "You abandoned me and your unborn children, stole our savings, disappeared for a decade, and now you've returned because you need money." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I know how it sounds. Do you? Do you really?" Rebecca stood, unable to contain her energy. "You left me homeless and penniless at 6 months pregnant with triplets. I had to rebuild my entire life from nothing. And you've done remarkably well," he countered, gesturing at the property. "Better than you could have with me, apparently." "No thanks to you." Daniel stood as well, desperation becoming more evident. "Rebecca, I wouldn't be here if I had any other option. I need $5 million to keep the prosecutors at bay and satisfy the most aggressive creditors. In exchange, I'm prepared to offer you a 20% stake in Thornton Innovations once we recover." Rebecca laughed, a genuine sound that clearly unsettled him. "Your company is worthless, Daniel, and even if it weren't, I'm not interested." "Then name your price. What do you want?" I'm fighting for my freedom here." Through the front window, Rebecca caught sight of her daughters, watching anxiously from inside. Frank had joined them, his protective presence evident in his stance. "What do I want?" Rebecca's voice turned steel cold. "I want the 10 years back that my daughters spent without a father. I want the dignity you stole from me when you left. Me destitute and pregnant. I want the wedding rings I had to sell to buy gas to get here." Daniel's face paled. "I can't change the past." "No, you can't. So what exactly do you think you can offer me that would be worth $5 million? The desperation in his eyes turned to something darker. "Information, perhaps, about the gold deposit beneath this property." Rebecca felt ice flood her veins, but maintained her composure. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" He smiled thinly. "We both know that's not true. And I'm not the only one who suspects. I've already had inquiries from several mining companies interested in my research." "Threats, Daniel? Is that where we are now?" He shrugged. "All pretense. Gone. Call it mutual assistance. You help me, I keep quiet about what I know. Simple business." Rebecca looked past him to the town of Gold Springs in the distance, the community that had embraced her, the place her grandmother had protected. "I need time to consider your proposal," she said finally. "Where are you staying?" "The Creekside Inn. Though your friend Lily didn't seem thrilled to see me. I'll contact you tomorrow. Now please leave." As Daniel drove away, Rebecca remained on the porch, her mind racing. She hadn't anticipated this specific threat, but her grandmother had prepared her for something like it. In the study that evening, she opened a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards and removed a small leather journal she hadn't reviewed in years, the one labeled Contingencies. The grandfather clock in the study chimed midnight as Rebecca turned another page in Eleanor's contingency journal. After putting the girls to bed with reassurances that everything was fine, she had summoned an emergency council in her grandmother's study. Frank, Lily, Margaret and Carlos had answered her call without question, just as they had countless times over the years. "He knows about the gold," Rebecca said simply, "or at least suspects enough to be dangerous." Frank's weathered face remained impassive, but his eyes held concern. "We always knew this day might come. Your grandmother predicted. Someone would eventually make the connection." Rebecca ran her finger down a page of meticulous notes. "According to the background check I commissioned last year, Daniel's company expanded rapidly after he left me. Singapore, Dubai, London. He specialized in tech acquisitions, buying promising startups, extracting their valuable assets, then discarding the remains, just like he did with you," Lily observed quietly. Rebecca nodded. "His pattern held until about 18 months ago, when a series of investments went bad. Then the SEC investigation began. Several of his business practices crossed legal lines: investor fraud, corporate espionage, tax schemes." "How did he find you?" Carlos asked. "You've been careful about keeping your name out of public records." "The trust uses my maiden name. The property is under the Foundation's ownership. Even the girls' birth certificates only list my name." Rebecca sighed. "But the Historical Society's Restoration Award last year made the regional news. My picture was included. He must have been monitoring for any mention of me." Margaret leaned forward. "What exactly does he want?" $5 million to keep his company afloat and stay out of prison. He offered me worthless company shares in exchange." Rebecca's laugh held no humor. "When I refused, he threatened to expose information about the gold deposit to mining companies." Silence settled over the room as everyone absorbed the implications. If word got out about the massive untapped gold deposit, it would change everything. Corporate mining interests would descend, using political connections and legal maneuvers to gain access. The town could be destroyed, both physically and culturally. Frank nodded toward the journal in Rebecca's hands. "What does Eleanor say about situations like this?" Rebecca turned to a marked page. She anticipated external threats. There's a section called Wolves at the Door that outlines several scenarios and responses. Her finger traced the neat handwriting. She believed the best defense wasn't secrecy alone, but controlled revelation. "What does that mean?" Carlos asked. "It means we reveal certain aspects of the truth ourselves, but on our terms, in a way that protects what matters most." Rebecca stood and moved to the wall map of the property and surrounding lands. "My grandmother mapped multiple deposit locations. What Daniel doesn't know is that we've been extracting from only one small vein, the testing site." She pointed to a location, marked with a discrete X. "The main deposits remain untouched, but we could offer Daniel access to this smaller site. Give him enough gold to solve his problems," Lily reasoned, "while protecting the larger deposit and the town." "Exactly, but with conditions." Rebecca turned to another page in the journal. Grandmother outlined a specific legal framework, a conservation easement combined with limited extraction rights. The document would grant him access to enough gold to address his financial problems while legally binding him to silence and environmental protections. "And if he refuses?" Margaret asked. Rebecca closed the journal carefully. "Then we moved to what grandmother called the nuclear option. We take control of the narrative completely." She retrieved a sealed envelope from the hidden floor compartment. Inside is a complete documentation package prepared years ago. Geological surveys, legal opinions, environmental impact studies, and a comprehensive town protection plan. If threatened, we don't hide the gold. We announce it ourselves, but through the Historical Preservation Trust that already owns most of the town. Frank nodded slowly. "Creating a legal fortress around the entire deposit before anyone can challenge it. Making any attempt to force conventional mining methods prohibitively expensive and legally complicated," Rebecca confirmed. "He won't accept." "Limited access," Lily predicted. "Men like Daniel always want everything." "You're probably right," Rebecca sighed. "But I need to try the peaceful option first for the girls' sake." "The girls?" Margaret asked. Rebecca's composure wavered slightly. "He's still their father, even if he abandoned them. I've never hidden that from them, but I've also never told them how cruel his abandonment was. If this turns into a public battle..." Understanding dawned on their faces. The triplets would inevitably learn the full truth about their father, and despite everything, Rebecca had always been careful not to poison their perception of the man who had never known them. "What do you need from us?" Carlos asked simply. "Be ready," Rebecca said. "If he accepts the limited offer, we'll need to prepare the test site documents. If not, we'll need to execute the protection plan quickly. Either way, we'll need to monitor him carefully." As her council dispersed with assignments, Rebecca remained in the study, staring at a family photo on her desk, herself and the three girls, taken on their 8th birthday. 3 bright faces with features that sometimes painfully echoed Daniel's. She hadn't told her friends about the third option in her grandmother's journal, one that Eleanor had labeled Last Resort. It involved information about old mining claims and historical documents that could be used as leverage against anyone who threatened the town. Information powerful enough to destroy reputations and businesses. Rebecca hoped it wouldn't come to that. But as she prepared for bed, she couldn't help remembering Daniel's expression when he had glimpsed the girls through the window. Not warmth or regret, but calculation, as if assessing assets rather than seeing his own children. The Daniel who had returned wasn't the man she had married. This Daniel was dangerous, desperate, and had nothing to lose. In the morning, she would offer him a lifeline with clear boundaries. Whether he grabbed it or chose conflict would reveal much about what he had truly become in the decade since he walked away from his family. Rebecca chose the town's only upscale restaurant for their meeting, a renovated bank building with private dining rooms where conversations couldn't be overheard. She arrived early, placing a slim portfolio on the table before texting Daniel the location. She dressed deliberately, a tailored business suit that conveyed authority and success. Her grandmother's silver locket around her neck contained small photos of the triplets, a reminder of what she was protecting. When Daniel entered, Rebecca noted subtle signs of strain despite his designer appearance. The tightness around his eyes, a barely perceptible nervous tick at his jawline. He'd aged more than 10 years should account for. "You look well," he offered as he sat across from her. "Let's skip the pleasantries," Rebecca replied, sliding a glass of water toward him. "I have a proposition for you." "I'm listening." His attempt at a relaxed posture didn't mask his eagerness. Rebecca opened the portfolio and removed a series of documents. "You're correct that there is a gold deposit beneath my property. It's substantially smaller than the rumors suggest, but valuable enough to address your financial situation." She watched carefully as disappointment flickered across his face. He had clearly been hoping for confirmation of a massive find. "I'm prepared to grant you limited extraction rights to a specific section of the deposit," she continued, placing a map on the table. "Our geological surveys indicate approximately $8 million in extractable gold using non-invasive methods." Daniel's eyes widened slightly at the figure, then narrowed with suspicion. "Why would you help me after what I did?" "I'm not doing this for you," Rebecca said evenly. "I'm doing it for our daughters, who deserve to grow up without the shadow of a public scandal involving their father." He flinched at the mention of the children he'd never met, and for a moment, Rebecca thought she glimpsed genuine remorse. It vanished quickly. "What's the catch?" He reached for the documents. "Several conditions." Rebecca placed her hand on the papers, preventing him from taking them. "First, you sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement covering both the gold deposit and any information about me or our daughters." She removed her hand, allowing him to examine the legal document. "Second, you agree to use only the extraction methods specified by our environmental engineers, methods that won't damage the surface structures or surrounding ecosystem." Daniel scanned the technical specifications with a frown. "This would take years, approximately 14 months for the full extraction," Rebecca corrected. "But the first phase could yield enough to address your most pressing legal issues within 60 days. His expression revealed his calculations, not ideal, but potentially enough to keep him out of prison while he sought other solutions. "Third," Rebecca continued, "you acknowledge that this arrangement constitutes full settlement of any claims related to our marriage, divorce, or shared assets. And if I refuse these terms," Rebecca met his gaze steadily, "then I activate the protection measures already in place. The entire deposit will be legally secured under a historical preservation trust with federal backing, making it inaccessible to any commercial exploitation." She leaned forward slightly. "I should mention that several key members of the SEC Enforcement Division serve on similar historical preservation boards and would take particular interest in a case involving attempts to force mineral extraction." "In a protected historical district," Daniel's face hardened. "You've thought of everything." "I learned from the best," Rebecca replied. "Both my grandmother and you taught me valuable lessons about protecting what matters." He picked up the pen she had placed beside the documents, weighing it in his hand. "There's something you're not telling me. This deposit is larger than you're admitting." Rebecca neither confirmed nor denied his suspicion. "What I'm offering solves your problems without destroying what I've built. It's more than fair." "And the girls?" he asked unexpectedly. "Do they know about me?" The question caught Rebecca off guard. "They know you're their biological father. They know you left before they were born. They don't know the details of how or why. Would they want to meet me?" His tone held something Rebecca couldn't quite identify. Curiosity, perhaps, or a calculating assessment of another potential. Leverage point. That would be their choice, not mine, she answered carefully, but it would only be possible after you've signed these agreements and demonstrated you can adhere to them. Daniel's expression darkened. So, they're part of the negotiation too? No, Rebecca said sharply. They're the reason I'm offering you anything at all, instead of simply destroying you. The vehemence in her voice surprised even her. They deserve better than having their lives disrupted by your mistakes. A heavy silence fell between them. I need to review these with my lawyer, Daniel finally said, gathering the documents. You have until tomorrow noon. Rebecca stood. After that, I moved to protect the deposit permanently. As she turned to leave, Daniel called after her. The woman who established that inn, Lily, she called me a coward to my face this morning. Rebecca paused. Lily doesn't mince words. Was I? The question seemed almost genuine. A coward? Rebecca considered him for a long moment. You abandoned your pregnant wife and unborn children, stealing everything we had built together. You disappeared for a decade, returning only when you needed something. What would you call it? Without waiting for his response, she walked out, maintaining her composure until she reached her car. Only then did her hands begin to shake. Frank was waiting in the passenger seat. How did it go? He'll sign, Rebecca said with certainty. He's desperate enough to accept the terms. But, Frank prompted, hearing the doubt in her voice. Rebecca started the engine. But he asked about the girls. I didn't expect that. Frank's expression grew concerned. You think he might try to use them somehow? I don't know, Rebecca admitted as they drove back toward Matthew's Manor. For a moment, he seemed almost human when he mentioned them. But with Daniel, appearances have always been deceiving, Frank finished for her. Rebecca nodded, unconsciously, touching the locket containing her daughter's photos. In less than 24 hours, she would know whether Daniel had chosen cooperation or conflict. Either way, she needed to prepare the girls for the possibility of meeting the father who had never wanted them, unless that too was just another manipulation in Daniel's desperate playbook. At precisely 11:58 a.m. the following day, Rebecca received a text message. Documents signed. Your lawyer has them. We need to talk again. Her attorney confirmed minutes later. He signed everything. Exactly as drafted, no amendments or addendums. It's legally binding. Rebecca should have felt relief. Instead, unease lingered. Daniel had capitulated too easily. The man she had known would have pushed for more, tried to manipulate the situation to his advantage. What game is he playing? She murmured to herself. As she prepared for the conversation she'd been dreading all morning. The triplets were in the sunroom, working on their homeschool science project. Sophia was measuring soil samples, Olivia sketching observations, and Emma enthusiastically documenting their findings on a tablet. Rebecca paused in the doorway, gathering her courage. How do you tell 3 10-year-old girls that the father who abandoned them before birth suddenly wants to meet them? Mom, you're doing the worried face, Emma said without looking up. I am not, Rebecca protested automatically. Yes, you are. All 3 girls replied in perfect unison, then dissolved into giggles. Rebecca joined them at the table. I need to talk to you about something important. The girls immediately sensed her serious tone and gave her their full attention. In that moment, they looked so similar, the same dark curls, the same questioning eyes. Yet each face held its own unique expression. Sophia's analytical patience, Olivia's sensitive perception, Emma's fearless curiosity. You know I've always told you that your father left before you were born, Rebecca began carefully. Sophia nodded. Because he wasn't ready to be a dad. And he was scared, Olivia added softly. And he was a jerk, Emma concluded with characteristic bluntness. Despite the tension, Rebecca couldn't suppress a small smile. Well, yes, all of those things. But there's something I need to tell you now. Your father has come back to town. The silence that followed was profound. "Why?" Sophia finally asked, her logical mind seeking understanding. "Initially, he came because he needs financial help," Rebecca answered honestly. "His business is in trouble and he's in legal difficulty. So he just wants money?" Emma's voice held indignation. "After all this time?" "That was his initial reason," Rebecca confirmed. "But he's also asked about meeting you." This revelation landed differently with each girl. Sophia's face became carefully blank, her defense mechanism when processing difficult information. Olivia bit her lip, eyes shimmering with conflicted emotions. Emma crossed her arms, skepticism etched across her features. "What did you tell him?" Olivia asked. "I told him that. Would be your decision, not mine." Rebecca looked at each daughter in turn. "I want you to know that you're under no obligation to meet him. If you don't want to, you don't have to." "Do you think we should?" Sophia's question held layers of meaning. Rebecca chose her words with extreme care. "I think that's something each of you needs to decide for yourself. But I want you to understand something very important. Whether you meet him or not, whether you like him or not, his actions have nothing to do with your worth. He didn't leave because of anything about you. The failure was entirely his." As the girls discussed among themselves, Rebecca stepped away to give them space. Through the window, she noticed a familiar Tesla turning into the driveway. Daniel was early, too early. Frank intercepted him before he reached the front door. From her vantage point, Rebecca could see the men engaged in what appeared to be a tense conversation, Daniel gesturing emphatically, Frank remaining stoic and unmovable. Her phone buzzed with a text from Frank. "He insists on speaking with you immediately. Says it's urgent." Rebecca steeled herself and walked outside to confront Daniel. "You're early," she said coolly. "We didn't have an appointment." "I needed to warn you," Daniel replied, his usual polish noticeably absent. He looked almost haggard in the bright afternoon light. "There's something I didn't tell you yesterday." "I'm shocked," Rebecca replied dryly. "This isn't a game, Rebecca." For perhaps the first time since his return, Daniel's voice held genuine urgency rather than calculation. "When I started investigating the property, I wasn't the only one looking. There's someone else." Rebecca's blood chilled. "Who?" "Victor Harmon. He was my primary investor in Singapore." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture she remembered from their marriage. "When my company started failing, he began his own investigation into potential assets. He's the one who first discovered the historical connection between your grandmother and this property." "What does he want?" "Everything," Daniel said simply. "He doesn't just want the gold, he wants the entire property, and he has the resources to take it. Local judges, county officials, state regulators, he has people in his pocket at every level." "Why? Are you telling me this?" Rebecca asked, suspicious of this sudden concern. Daniel hesitated. "I saw them yesterday, our daughters, through the window when they came in from outside." Something shifted in his expression. "They look like my mother." The unexpected observation caught Rebecca off guard. Daniel's mother had died when he was in college, before Rebecca had met him. He had rarely spoken of her, but when he did, it was always with genuine love and loss. "Harmon is dangerous, Rebecca," Daniel continued. "I've seen what he does to people who stand in his way. When I realized the girls were involved," he trailed off, "just because I was a terrible husband. And father doesn't mean I want my children in danger." Rebecca studied him, trying to discern truth from manipulation. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "The agreement we signed, it won't stop Harmon. He knows about the gold, but not the precise location." Daniel met her eyes directly. "I think we need to work together to protect the girls and this property." Before Rebecca could respond, Emma's voice called from the front door. "Mom, is that him? Is that our father?" Daniel turned. seeing his daughter in person for the first time. The moment of recognition between them, the shock on both their faces, was something Rebecca would remember for the rest of her life. The silence that followed Emma's appearance stretched uncomfortably. Daniel stared at his daughter with an expression Rebecca couldn't fully decipher. Shock, certainly, but also something that looked disconcertingly like recognition. "Emma, please go back inside," Rebecca said, her voice steadier than she felt. "But now, please." Rebecca rarely used that tone, and Emma recognized its significance. She retreated, but not before giving Daniel one last curious look. "She has my mother's eyes," Daniel said quietly after Emma disappeared. "The shape, the expressiveness." "Not now, Daniel." Rebecca turned to Frank. "Can you stay with the girls while we talk? Call Lily to come over too." As Frank headed inside, Rebecca led Daniel to the garden gazebo. Close enough to keep an eye on the house, but far enough to ensure privacy. "Explain everything," she demanded. "Who exactly is Victor Harmon, and what does he want with my property?" Daniel sat heavily on the bench. Victor Harmon built his fortune in resource extraction across Southeast Asia. Mining, timber, oil. If it's valuable and can be taken from the ground, he has a hand in it. He operates through layers of shell companies and proxies. "Like you," Rebecca observed coldly. Daniel accepted the jab with a grimace. "I was an amateur compared to Harmon. His operations displace villages, destroy ecosystems, and occasionally, people who can't be bought disappear. But he's careful, maintains a respectable public image through charitable foundations and political connections." "And he's your investor?" "Was. When Thornton Innovations began struggling, he offered to bail me out. I didn't realize he was really conducting a hostile takeover." Daniel's face tightened. "He seized control of my company, my patents, everything. When he discovered I'd been investigating this property, he demanded all my research." "Did you give it to him?" "Some of it. Enough to satisfy him temporarily while I came here to warn you." Rebecca's suspicion must have shown, because Daniel added, "I know you have no reason to trust me, but Harmon makes me look like a saint by comparison." Before Rebecca could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. "Unknown man, inexpensive. Suit asking questions at town hall about property records. Claims to represent Historical Preservation Society, but seems focused on mineral rights. Very persistent." Rebecca showed Daniel the message. "Your friend works quickly." "That's not Harmon. He'd never show his face directly. That's one of his scouts." Daniel's expression grew grave. "It means he's moved from research to action phase. We may have days, not weeks." "What exactly do you think he'll do?" Rebecca asked. "Whatever it takes. Legal challenges, environmental surveys that accidentally reveal gold deposits, pressure on local officials to rezone the area for commercial development. If that doesn't work, more direct methods. The threat to everything she had built, her home, the town, her daughter's security, ignited a cold fury in Rebecca. "He can try. This town has protected its secrets for generations." "You don't understand what you're dealing with," Daniel insisted. "Harmon has corrupted judges, bribed officials, even compromised FBI agents. He's not just wealthy, he's connected." Rebecca studied Daniel, attempting to separate truth from manipulation. "Why do you suddenly care? Yesterday you were perfectly willing to threaten me to get what you wanted." Something shifted in Daniel's expression. "I was desperate," he admitted, "but seeing Emma just now—" He trailed off, seeming genuinely unsettled. "I never wanted to know them because I was afraid of what it would mean, the responsibility, the commitment. It was easier to pretend they didn't exist. And now I realize what I threw away." His voice held an unfamiliar rawness. "I can't undo the past 10 years, but I can try to protect them from Harmon." Rebecca wasn't ready to accept this apparent change of heart, but the threat demanded her attention regardless of Daniel's sincerity. "What would you suggest?" she asked guardedly. immediate legal reinforcement of the property protections, environmental surveys that would make mining prohibitively expensive to permit, political connections at the state level to counter his local influence. Daniel leaned forward. And a strategic revelation of certain aspects of the gold deposit to create public interest that would make underhanded tactics more visible. Rebecca was struck by how closely his suggestions aligned with her grandmother's contingency plans. "We've already started most of those measures," she admitted, "but they take time we don't have." Daniel glanced toward the house. Harmon could be here as soon as tomorrow. As if on cue, Rebecca's phone rang, Lily calling from town. "Rebecca, there's a situation in town. 2 black SUVs just pulled up outside the county records office. Men, in suits, not locals. They're requesting historical property maps and mineral surveys." "Stall them," Rebecca instructed. "Use whatever bureaucratic delays you can manage." After ending the call, she turned to Daniel. "It seems your timeline was optimistic. They're already here." Daniel stood abruptly. "We need to move now." "Where?" "Do you keep the documentation about the gold deposit? Do you really think I tell you that?" Rebecca's voice hardened. "If we're going to fight Harmon, I need to know what we're working with." Rebecca made a swift decision. "You get one chance, Daniel, one. If I see any sign you're playing both sides, our temporary alliance ends, and you'll never see the girls again." His expression sobered. "Understood." As they walked back toward the house, the front door opened. All 3 girls stood on the porch, their postures reflecting their personalities, Sophia analytical and reserved, Olivia hesitant but curious, Emma bold and direct. "We want to meet him," Emma announced, clearly speaking for all 3. Properly, Rebecca looked at her daughters, then at Daniel, whose face showed a complex mixture of fear and longing. "Girls, this is Daniel Thornton," she said simply, "your biological father." Daniel seemed to struggle for words. "Hello?" he finally managed, sounding nothing like the confident businessman who had arrived in town days earlier. Sophia stepped forward first, practical as always. "Do you really know how to stop bad people from taking our home?" "I'm going to try," Daniel replied, the honesty in his voice surprising even Rebecca. "Then you should come inside," Sophia said. "Mum's study has all the contingency plans." As they entered the house, Rebecca caught Frank's questioning glance and gave him a slight nod, still cautious, but acknowledging the shifting reality. External threats had created an unexpected and uneasy alliance with the man who had once destroyed her life. Now they faced a race against time to protect not just the gold, but everything Rebecca had built from the ashes of Daniel's betrayal. Mom's study has all the contingency plans. Sophia's matter-of-fact statement hung in the air as they entered the house. What followed was one of the strangest afternoons of Rebecca's life, watching Daniel meet their daughters under the looming threat of Harmon's arrival. The initial interaction had been awkward, tentative questions from the girls, mixed with Daniel's hesitant answers. But when Olivia asked why he'd left, Daniel surprised Rebecca with his honesty. "I was selfish and afraid," he'd said simply. "It was the worst mistake of my life." The moment had been interrupted by urgent calls from town. By nightfall, reports confirmed what they already feared. Harmon's people were establishing a presence in Gold Springs. Morning found Eleanor Matthews' study transformed into a war room. Maps and documents covered every surface as Rebecca, Daniel, Frank and Margaret developed their strategy. The girls had been reluctantly sent to Lily's apartment above the inn for safety, though Emma had protested vigorously. "Harmon will use multiple approaches simultaneously," Daniel explained, marking points on the town map. Legal challenges to property rights, environmental surveys as pretext to access the land, and pressure on local officials. We've already activated the historical preservation protections, Margaret reported. The entire downtown district, including Matthews Manor, is now under emergency historical review, which freezes any development applications for 45 days. Rebecca nodded. The trust documents have been filed with both state and federal agencies, establishing clear ownership and conservation requirements. Carlos has the town's water district conducting urgent maintenance on all lines near the property, making ground access temporarily restricted. Daniel looked impressed despite himself. You've been preparing for this for years. My grandmother taught me to be ready for wolves, Rebecca replied. Now, what do you know about Harmon's specific plans? He has a playbook. Daniel pulled out his laptop, opening a series of files. Here are records of his previous acquisitions. He typically begins with a legal challenge to existing ownership, usually some technical flaw in property transfers, or tax records. Margaret's phone buzzed. Speaking of which, the county clerk just called. Someone has filed a formal challenge to the original transfer of the property from Eleanor Matthews to the trust, claiming irregularities in the notarization. Right on schedule, Daniel murmured. Next, he'll approach from an environmental angle. As, if summoned by his words, Frank received a call from a town council member. Two men claiming to be from the State Environmental Protection Agency are requesting urgent access to the property, something about potential contamination from historical mining activities. Fake credentials, Daniel confirmed after seeing their identification photos. These are Harmon's security personnel, not state officials. Rebecca felt a chill. Harmon's operation was moving with frightening efficiency. What's his next move? Direct approach. He or his representative will make contact, presenting the mounting legal challenges as insurmountable, then offer a generous buyout. Daniel's expression darkened. When that fails, things become unpleasant. The doorbell rang, startling everyone. Through the security camera, they saw a sleek black Bentley in the driveway and a distinguished-looking man in his 60s at the door. That's Victor Harmon, Daniel whispered, his face paling. He never shows up personally this early unless... Unless... What? Rebecca demanded. Unless he considers this acquisition particularly valuable or urgent. Daniel looked genuinely worried. Be careful. He's charming, intelligent, and utterly ruthless. Rebecca straightened her shoulders. Frank, call Sheriff Morris. Tell him we have trespassers attempting to access a historically protected property. She turned to Daniel. Stay out of sight initially. You're our ace if needed. When Rebecca opened the door, she was struck by Harmon's commanding presence. Tall and impeccably dressed, with silver hair and penetrating blue eyes, he exuded authority and confidence. Mrs. Matthews, I presume? Victor Harmon. His smile seemed genuine, his handshake firm. I apologize for arriving unannounced, but I believe we have matters of mutual interest to discuss. It's Miss Matthews, and you're trespassing on private property, Rebecca replied calmly. I must ask you to leave. Harmon's smile remained unchanged. I understand your caution, but I think you'll want to hear my proposal. May I come in? No, you may not. Any proposals can be sent through appropriate legal channels. Something cold flickered in Harmon's eyes before his pleasant mask returned. As you wish. I'll be direct then. My companies have identified significant mineral deposits beneath this property. I'm prepared to offer you $20 million, considerably above market value for full ownership. Rebecca kept her expression neutral. This property is not for sale at any price, Mr. Harmon. It's protected by multiple legal instruments as both a historical site and an environmental conservation area. Legal protections can be adjusted with the right approach. Harmon gestured casually. The amount is negotiable, of course. The property is not. Harmon studied her, his assessment almost palpable. "You know, your former husband was much more reasonable when we discussed this matter initially." The mention of Daniel was clearly intended to unsettle her. Rebecca maintained her composure. "Then perhaps you should continue your discussions with him." "Oh, I intend to." Harmon's smile thinned. "Daniel has significant outstanding obligations to my companies. His cooperation is already secured. It was a calculated move, designed to plant doubt." Rebecca refused to take the bait. "Then we have nothing further to discuss." Harmon's pleasant demeanor shifted slightly. "Ms. Matthews, I admire your resolve, but you should understand that I always acquire what I set my sights on. Always." He handed her a business card. "When you reconsider, and you will, call me. My offer expires in 48 hours. As he turned to leave, Daniel emerged from inside the house, positioning himself beside Rebecca. Harmon's momentary surprise quickly transformed into amusement. "Daniel, what an unexpected pleasure. I see you've reunited with your ex-wife. How touching." "It's over, Victor," Daniel said with unexpected steadiness. "Your play for this property won't succeed." "My dear boy, surely you haven't forgotten our arrangement. Your debt to my companies exceeds $30 million, unless you've suddenly discovered hidden resources." Harmon's gaze shifted between them, calculating. "Ah, I see. You've decided to throw your lot in with your ex-wife, hoping to access the gold through her instead of me." "There is no gold," Rebecca stated firmly, "just a historic property you're attempting to seize through manipulation and intimidation." Harmon laughed softly. "We all know that's not true, but I appreciate the performance." His expression hardened as he looked at Daniel. "You've made a poor choice of allies, Daniel. Very poor indeed." As Harmon returned to his car, where 2 security personnel waited, Daniel closed the door. "He'll escalate quickly now," he warned. "That was just the opening move." Rebecca's phone buzzed with an alert from the security system. Multiple vehicles were approaching town from the main highway, black SUVs identical to those seen at the county records office. "How many men does he have?" she asked. "For something this valuable, dozens, and they're not just researchers and lawyers anymore." Daniel's face was grim. "He's bringing in his security team, ex-military private contractors." Rebecca made a swift decision. "Call Sheriff Morris again, then contact everyone on our contingency list. It's time to activate the nuclear option." As Frank made the calls, Rebecca turned to Daniel. "Did you really owe him $30 million? "Yes." Daniel met her gaze directly. "But I'd rather be in debt for the rest of my life than let him anywhere near our daughters." The sincerity in his voice surprised her. Perhaps, Rebecca thought, there was still a fragment of the man she had once loved somewhere inside the stranger who had returned to her life. But sentimentality would have to wait. Harmon's forces were converging on Gold Springs, and the real battle was just beginning. The Gold Springs Community Center had never been so crowded. As dawn broke, townspeople filed in, shopkeepers, farmers, teachers, retirees, responding to an emergency alert sent through the town's network. Many looked confused, others concerned, but all shared a sense of purpose born from generations of protecting their community. Rebecca stood on the small stage, surrounded by her closest allies. Frank and Margaret flanked her, while Daniel remained slightly apart, aware of his outsider status despite his newfound alliance with Rebecca. "Thank you all for coming so quickly," Rebecca began. "Gold Springs faces an immediate threat from Victor, Harmon and his companies, who are attempting to seize control of Matthew's property and potentially large portions of our town." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Rebecca continued, "Many of you have protected this town's secrets before. My grandmother Eleanor trusted this community with knowledge that could have destroyed it in the wrong hands. Now I'm asking for your help again." She revealed what most longtime residents already suspected, but few had confirmed. the existence of significant gold deposits beneath the historical district. She explained Harmon's methods and his current moves against the town. My grandmother prepared for this day, Rebecca explained. She called it the nuclear option, not because it destroys, but because once launched, it cannot be recalled. Daniel stepped forward. Harmon operates in shadows. His power comes from operating beyond public scrutiny. The nuclear option brings everything into the light. Rebecca nodded. Exactly. Within the hour, our attorney will file comprehensive documentation, with state and federal agencies establishing the historical and environmental significance of Gold Springs. Simultaneously, we're releasing carefully prepared information to select media outlets about the sustainable extraction methods pioneered by my grandmother. Methods that could revolutionize mining while preserving communities and ecosystems. Carlos, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. It's going public with the gold deposit, but on our terms? Yes, Rebecca confirmed. Complete transparency about the gold, but with irrefutable documentation establishing the town's legal protections. Once this information is public, Harmon loses his advantage. Any attempt to seize control through underhanded means will face intense scrutiny. The plan was ambitious. Sheriff Morris would maintain roadblocks at town entrances, restricting access to residents only. A team led by Margaret would monitor all legal filings. Carlos and his crew would maintain the infrastructure emergency maintenance, preventing unauthorized access to key areas. The Historical Society would conduct round-the-clock documentation of buildings and landmarks, establishing their significance beyond dispute. When Rebecca finished outlining the plan, an elderly woman stood. Eleanor saved this town once before. If her granddaughter says this is what we need to do, I'm in. One by one, townspeople volunteered for specific roles, organizing with surprising efficiency. Decades of quiet preparation had readied them for in this moment, even if many hadn't realized it. As the meeting dispersed, Daniel approached Rebecca. Your grandmother was remarkable. This plan, it's comprehensive, elegant even. She had decades to prepare, Rebecca replied. And generations of Matthew's women have protected this town. Daniel's expression grew serious. Harmon won't stop. Even with your nuclear option, he'll find angles of attack. That's why we need to speak with the girls, Rebecca replied. There's an aspect of the plan that concerns them directly. They found the triplets at Lily's apartment, not resting as instructed but strategizing on their own. Emma had drawn an elaborate map of escape routes from town, while Sophia had created a communication system using coded text messages. Olivia was sketching what appeared to be disguises. We figured you might need backup plans, Emma explained. Unapologetically, Rebecca felt a surge of pride mingled with concern. Actually, we do need your help, but not with escape routes. The nuclear option has a component specifically about you three. The girls listened intently as Rebecca explained. Eleanor's journals had anticipated that any serious threat would endanger her descendants. She had established a secondary trust in the girls' names, containing documentation of the gold deposit, extraction methods, and legal protections. Documentation that would only become active if triggered by specific events. Your great-grandmother believed that children are the future of any community, Rebecca explained. She structured the trust so that you three are not just beneficiaries, but essential stakeholders in Gold Springs' protection. Daniel, who had been absorbing this information with visible surprise, spoke up. Essentially, even if someone managed to challenge Rebecca's ownership, they'd still have to contend with the girl's separate legal interest in both the property and the extraction methods. Exactly, Rebecca confirmed. But activating this requires all three girls to agree, along with a sworn statement that they're acting of their own free will. Emma straightened immediately. Of course we agree. This is our home. Sophia, ever practical, asked, What do we need to do exactly? Sign documents with the notary who's waiting downstairs, then record video statements explaining your decision, Rebecca answered. Olivia, the most sensitive to undercurrents, looked between Rebecca and Daniel. Are you both okay with this, working together? The question hung in the air between them. Rebecca had been so focused on the immediate threat, she'd barely processed the strange reality of working alongside the man who had once devastated her life. I think, Daniel said carefully, that protecting you three is something we can absolutely agree on. Rebecca nodded, surprising herself with the realization that it was true. Whatever their past, whatever mistakes Daniel had made, they were united in this moment by their concern for their daughters. As the family prepared to implement the final pieces of Eleanor's grand design, Rebecca's phone buzzed. A text from Sheriff Morris. Harmon's men attempting to enter town from the eastern access road. At least a dozen vehicles. State police contacted, but minimum 30 minutes away. The nuclear option was launched, but Harmon wasn't waiting for the fallout. The confrontation was arriving faster than anticipated. Rebecca met Daniel's eyes. It's starting. Gold Springs transformed into a fortress in less than an hour. Sheriff Morris and his deputies established barricades at town entrances, while volunteers formed a human chain around the historical district. News vans began arriving, alerted by Rebecca's carefully timed press releases about the revolutionary sustainable mining techniques developed in historic Gold Springs. At Matthews Manor, Rebecca watched from her grandmother's study as Daniel fielded calls from financial reporters, the former CEO suddenly turning whistleblower against Harmon's unethical business practices. The irony wasn't lost on her. The man who had once stolen everything from her was now using his business connections to protect what she had built. Reuters is running with the story, Daniel reported, ending another call. Financial Times and Wall Street Journal are both investigating Harmon's previous acquisitions for similar patterns. Frank entered with an update from town. Harmon's vehicles are stopped at the eastern barricade. Sheriffs standing firm on requiring identification, and stated business from everyone entering town during the state of emergency. And the girls? Rebecca asked. Documents all signed and filed with both Sacramento and Washington, Lily's keeping them at the back of the inn, away from windows. Rebecca nodded, trying to manage her rising anxiety. The plan was working, but Harmon was a formidable enemy who wouldn't be deterred by initial obstacles. As if summoned by her thoughts, her phone rang, an unlisted number. Ms. Matthews. Harmon's voice was precisely controlled, but she detected underlying fury. You've created quite a spectacle. Was that really necessary? It seemed appropriate, Rebecca replied evenly. Your history of acquiring properties through intimidation and legal manipulation deserved some spotlight. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Harmon's voice hardened. Those barricades won't stop me. The media attention is a minor inconvenience. By the time the regulatory agencies process your filings, I'll already control enough of the town council to override any local protections. You'll find Gold Springs residents remarkably resistant to outside pressure, Rebecca countered. Everyone has a price, Harmon stated coldly. But let me offer you one final opportunity to be reasonable. $40 million, more than generous for what you've built there. Rebecca caught Daniel's eye from across the room. He mouthed silently, "Keep him talking." He was recording the conversation while simultaneously texting someone. "What happens to the town in your plan?" she asked, stalling. "Progress happens," Harmon replied dismissively. "Some businesses relocate, some buildings make way for more profitable ventures. That's capitalism, Ms. Matthews." Rebecca's free hand curled into a fist. "And if I refuse?" "Then things become unpleasant. I understand you have 3 lovely daughters. Would be terrible if anything disrupted their bright futures." The threat to her children, spoken so casually, ignited something primal in Rebecca. "You're recording this call, aren't you, Mr. Harmon?" she said, her voice deadly calm. A moment of silence. "As are you, I expect." "Indeed. Threatening children. Not something your shareholders would appreciate. Or the FBI agents currently reviewing your business practices." Another pause. "You're bluffing." Daniel approached, showing her his phone screen. A text exchange with an FBI contact from his days as a legitimate CEO, confirming they were actively investigating Harmon based on Daniel's whistleblower statement. "Check your newsfeed, Mr. Harmon," Rebecca suggested. "The story's breaking now." As if on cue, Frank turned up the television, where a financial news network was running a breaking story. "Mining magnate Victor Harmon under federal investigation. Whistleblower alleges pattern of fraud and intimidation." The camera cut to Daniels, former CFO, a woman who had apparently also decided to come forward with evidence of Harmon's illegal activities. "You've made a grave mistake," Harmon said, his composure finally cracking. "This isn't over." "Actually, it is," Rebecca replied. "Your investors are already distancing themselves. 3 regulatory agencies are reviewing your permits, and you've been recorded threatening my children." Before Harmon could respond, they heard commotion in the background of his call, voices announcing federal agents with warrants. The call disconnected abruptly. Daniel looked at Rebecca with genuine admiration. "You kept him talking just long enough." Frank's police scanner crackled with updates. Federal agents had intercepted Harmon at the Eastern Barricade with warrants related to financial crimes, witness intimidation, and conspiracy. For a moment the study was silent as the reality sank in. They had won. Harmon's empire was crumbling in real time, his carefully constructed shields of shell companies and political connections insufficient against the combined forces Rebecca had mobilized. "We should tell the girls," Rebecca said finally. The celebration in Gold Springs lasted well into the night. The town square filled with residents sharing food, music, and a profound sense of community victory. News crews captured it all, cementing the town's narrative as David to Harmon's Goliath. At the edge of the celebration, Rebecca found a quiet moment on a park bench, watching as her daughters moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations. And sharing in the town's relief, Daniel approached cautiously. "May I join you?" Rebecca nodded, making space on the bench. They sat in surprisingly comfortable silence, watching their daughters. "What will you do now?" Rebecca finally asked. Daniel considered the question. "Legally, I'm still in trouble, not as much as Harmon, but my cooperation with the federal investigation doesn't erase my past actions. I'll probably face charges, maybe serve time. And after that?" He turned to her, his expression unguarded. "I'd like to know my daughters, if they'll have me, not here, not intruding on the life you've built, but somehow." Rebecca studied the man beside her, different from the ambitious, ruthless husband who had abandoned her, yet still recognizable in moments. "That would be their decision to make." "And you?" Daniel asked carefully. "Could you ever forgive me?" Rebecca gazed across the town square, at the community that had embraced her when she had nothing, at the daughters who had given her purpose when she felt lost. "I already have," she realized aloud. "Not because you deserve it, but because holding onto that anger took energy I needed elsewhere." Daniel nodded, accepting this with unexpected grace. "For what it's worth, seeing what you've built here, not just a home or business, but this community, how you've raised our daughters. I've never been more wrong about anything than I was about you." Before Rebecca could respond, the girls appeared before them. Emma, bold as always, spoke first. "Are you going back to jail with the bad man?" Daniel blinked, then answered honestly. "Not with him, but I did some wrong things too. I'll have to face consequences for those." Sophia, analytical and direct. "Will you come back after?" "I'd like to," Daniel replied. "If you want me to," Olivia, the peacemaker. "Maybe we could write letters while you're away, to get to know each other." The simple suggestion, so practical, so hopeful, brought unexpected tears to Daniel's eyes. "I'd like that very much." Rebecca watched this exchange, feeling a strange sense of completion. The man who had left her with nothing had returned to find she possessed everything truly valuable: a loving family, a supportive community, inner strength he had never recognized, and yes, a fortune he could never have imagined. "You should dance," Emma announced decisively, looking between her parents. "Both of you, with us." As they joined the celebration, Rebecca caught Frank's eye across the square. He raised his glass in silent toast to her grandmother's memory. Eleanor Matthews had somehow foreseen it all: the challenges, the threats, even the possibility of redemption. The gold beneath Gold Springs would now be extracted according to her visionary methods, bringing prosperity without destruction. The town would thrive, protected by the unprecedented legal framework they had established. And Rebecca's family had come full circle, broken, rebuilt, and ultimately stronger than before. Later that night, as fireworks burst over the town square, Rebecca stood with an arm around each daughter, watching as Daniel awkwardly attempted a folk dance with town residents who had once been strangers and were now his defenders. "Are we going to be okay, Mom?" Olivia asked quietly. Rebecca thought about everything they had overcome: abandonment, poverty, threats and fear, and everything they had gained in the process. "Yes," she said with absolute certainty. "We're going to be more than okay." Above them, the stars shone over Gold Springs, just as they had for generations of Matthews women who had protected this land, each in her own way, passing down not just wealth but wisdom from mother to daughter. And in that moment, Rebecca knew her grandmother had been right all along. What seems like the end of one path is often the beginning of the one you were meant to walk all along.